It's day one at Nexus 2024 in Jacksonville, Florida. And today we're talking to Neal Duiker and Shaun about contracting and program management behind the digital twinning for the B-21. What's a digital twin? It's a virtual model of a real-world object or system. These simulations help the government, contractors, engineers, and everyone involved understand the state of the physical asset, respond to changes, improve operations, and add value to their system. I wanted to know more about the innovations in contracting and program management that Neal and Shaun implemented, bringing value to the B-21 program. I'll ask what they think others can learn from their exciting new approach, and what's their key to getting success when they're staring down the barrel of a fail. I'm your host, Scott Williams, along with Jim Valley, and you'll learn these things and more in this episode of Contracting Conversations. We're here in Jacksonville, Florida at day one of the NCMA Nexus Conference and have the pleasure of speaking with Neal Duiker and Shaun Branam here from the Air Force Rapid Capability Office B-21 Digital Twinning Project. Neal's the contracting officer and Shaun is the program manager, so we're welcome to have him here this morning. They're going to be doing a team presentation at the conference and stop by to chat with us for a little bit. So first question for both of you guys, tell us a little bit about the team and kind of how it came together and what you'd like the audience to hear.
Yeah, so as you stated, program is ran out of the Rapid Capabilities Office in DC. So geographically separated unit between DC folks and then where we have folks at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and then also at Duiker Air Force Base. And then we have a plethora of people across the country that do, everything within the acquisition life cycle. And then amongst that, with our prime contractors, and the suppliers that we have, really going all the way across the country. Global Strike as the owning user for this out at Barksdale, and then we still do a lot of work in regards to main operating bases that we do. And so all functionals, very lean team, flat organization. I think entire program office is about 300 people tops, and so we keep it very lean, very flat. And I think that helps us move in a very organized fashion, make sure it's absolutely critical that we get that cross collaboration with the integrated progress teams, information up and out to decision makers as fast as possible.
All right, fantastic. So what have you done with your team to kind of bring all the functionals together to work together, which is, obviously pretty difficult to do?
Yeah. Well, I'll pass that off to Neal to go over some of the digital twin, and I'll expand on that as we go.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so we came here actually with a good portion of our IPT. So we are here with one of our other program managers. We're here with one of our engineers and our data manager. And the whole point of the digital twinning team is to kind of take the Department of Defense's digital transformation effort and their policy and how do we implement it and instantiate it in a major weapon system kind of from the initiation. And so when we first started the B-21 program, it started back in 2014, even before this policy occurred, right? And so that's when the initial contracts were. And the contract was really structured on on kind of the business as usual, on traditional siege roles and how data is being handled, a lot of two-dimensional drawings, kind of the antiquated way. And so how do we take that, the policy of digital transformation and move it into kind of a new weapon system to kind of put that into practice? And so we took that policy and an existing contract and tried to figure out and establish a team, both how are we going to frame this and how does it make sense for the weapon system in and of itself? And then how do we work both with our prime contractor and our suppliers to move us into a digital native format? And it creates kind of really exciting opportunity for implementation. And so we brought this case study in particular kind of out of a larger framework of active management, which Shaun can speak to from a programmatic standpoint, and worked to how do we manage and re-vector our contractor into kind of implementing something new and exciting for the government. And that really did draw a lot of identifying the right resources. We have a lot of really high expertise ANAS type contractors who have experience in building out a digital environment owned by the government. And the intent is for us to house that data in the government, but then also to pass those requirements on to a prime and subcontractors who are already doing a lot of work and development for the program to be able to grab that information for use.
And then I think from a program management perspective, ours is to take those inputs, evaluate where the team wants to go, how that policy influences our program, and then balance that. As programs have cost schedule performance risks that we have to go take a look at from an acquisition program baseline, we also have user requirements. And ultimately what we want to do is get the right capabilities, the right requirements to make sure that we can meet our operational mandate for the user and the national defense. And so there's an evaluation amongst, financial managers, amongst logisticians, engineering, program management, and contracting to find the right technical requirements that meets exactly what we need at the exact right time at an exact balance of risk. And that could be cost risk, it could be schedule risk, it could be performance risk. And then as soon as you identify, putting that together in a coherent, collaborative package and having that transparency with the contractor to say, this is where we want to go. What risk and issues do you see? What would this take? And we've done a great job collaborating with our prime contractor and through to the suppliers to get access in the systems, to understand the digital engineering models so we can have daily insight into where they're doing, what changes being made. And that's critical to be able to balance that as the program looks to transition from one phase to the next and ultimately get the jets out to the mobs.
Well, wonderful. I think that the relationship between the team and your industry partner is extremely important as you go through this. A couple of things you'd like to maybe say about that relationship or some of the challenges you guys have overcome together?
Yeah,
make
absolutely.
the team successful?
From the get-go, the SPDs that currently started the program and even the PEO at the Rapid Capabilities Office was absolutely critical that we have that transparency from day one. So, one-on-one talks amongst the program manager for the program for Northrop Grumman or our SPD. We connect at the PEO and the CEO level for hard decisions that are going to make corporate impacts and program impacts. And then down to the lower level, they're very empowered to reach out to their counterparts within, a prime or getting access to a certain system. What we say is just the same we have is no data to be used for evil. And we really mean that is they give us that transparency. We can't turn that right back around and hold their head underwater and make sure that, because that kills that transparency. And so that's been very good about understanding what those requirements are and then aligning that to say, here's what I think the prime can do and the tier one suppliers. Here's what the government is. What risks do we need to go address? And then how do we get that ultimately into a coherent buy-in from all the team members to make sure everybody's moving in the right direction?
I think the other interesting point, right, is back when the original contract was written, we had the best requirements that we had at the time. Mm-hmm. But then recognizing that as technology maturates or as policy, that we've taken an approach where the contract is less of written in stone and more flexible in being able to identify areas where, as the contractor or even subcontractors are in its performance, that there are instances where maybe performance needs to be changed because of other circumstances. We had a pandemic thrown in there, right? And so how do we readdress the risk and be flexible, right? At times with significant partnering with the contractor. Sometimes there's some responsibility actions that go in, but through these business deals and recognizing that the contract is a tool to flexibly get where we ultimately want to be becomes the name of the game. And that's what's really exciting about the culture within the B-21 program, and even not to say that we don't have tough conversations with our partners, and certainly there's a lot of that happens as well. But in the end, we're all working to a collaborative environment to kind of implement some of these policies and risk reduction measures for the benefit of both partners on either side of the business arrangement.
And I'd say we don't let it come to a stalemate, right? We usually recognize very quickly when maybe at the lower levels they cannot come to some kind of agreement that elevates up very quickly. So we can make decisions, not delay and make impacts to our program, but really getting insight into what their issues are. And then just having the conversation amongst the directors and the PEOs to say, this is ultimately where we need everybody to go, make the hard decisions, and then laying that strategic vision out so everyone can follow.
And that's pretty neat how you said you have a flexible contract, because something like this is just high technical, right? And technology is changing so rapidly, especially with AI and everything. The fact that you can be flexible, I think, is critical to mission success.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, I think that under standard practice of the government. You have a very solid requirement. And if the contractor starts deviating from that, and other programs that have worked, it's been a lot of just really tough conversations, trying to hold them accountable, trying to, and that just builds friction and a lack of relationship, on some of those programs. Here, not to say that some of that doesn't exist, right? I mean, that there's still that natural tendency, but to be able to kind of say, what can we do together with the resources that we have to be able to buy down that risk and make strategic projects? So like the digital twinning team, really being able to look at how to move into digital artifacting, for our sustainment purposes, for model-based systems engineering, in the future, being able to see the criticality of that really led us into some incentive-based contracting that didn't exist or wasn't contemplated at the original contract, to say, how do we move you from these old requirements, help you adopt these new requirements, and then see the business case on how it benefits both the U.S. government and the prime contractor, and not even the prime contractor, but also how it flows into our subs and the entire supply chain base. I mean, that's exciting, and being able to work, directly with the prime, and then in a lot of instances, partnering with the prime into our subcontractors to let them see the big picture of where we're trying to go and why this is beneficial. I mean, that's what's really kind of new and exciting, kind of a paradigm shift for how we usually do business into the new approach that I think new programs need to adopt.
Yeah, and that's one area that we use as an example is digital twinning. But I think what we've done is, and I think the gentleman in the conference said earlier, is that contractor really is an instrument. That is our instrument. That is our tool that we can use in what we would say actively manage it. And I would say that's active evaluation on those requirements. Are they right requirements? Are they heading in those right directions? Mm-hmm. Are they focusing on those requirements? How do our incentives play a part? Are they motivating the right behavior? Or is it something they're going out? Is it worth their while as a cost benefit analysis perspective? And then really taking a look at, like, is there a way to change and adjust as you move through time and say, well, we know the number one risk on our program is this, and maybe we need to go address that. And how do we get that behavior and focus with the prime and the subs to be able to go after that and make sure that we are making the right risk-based decisions to meet our operational mandate that we need for the B-21.
I think what's important about that flexibility, right, is we kind of see an end state of where we want to go. And when you're doing something new for the first time, so like even on this example we brought to the conference on digital twinning, right, to be able to take an entire weapon system and try and get a digital twin of it managed by the government, we have an idea of where we want to go. Rather than admire the problem and spend forever setting requirements, we set the best requirements we could, we went into execution, and then when we realized, wait a second, we might be a little bit off kilter from where we're trying to go, is flexibly trying to work with the contractor to get them back on track, whether it's an adjustment in the requirements or maybe there was some language tweaks that needed to happen to get us back in the right direction to end up where we're at. So even though we're not done, and I can't say that we've had a complete success story, I mean, where we're going is different than, as I understand it, any other program, at least in the Air Force's portfolio. And then certainly there's going to be lessons learned for us to take forward into other programs and say, here's what we would do differently. And that's, I think, what's exciting is there's not a decision where we're too far off our objective to then be able to recalibrate, revector back into the end state where we want to go.
And that also obviously comes, of course, with like briefings to Air Force, OSD leadership, make sure we have the buy-in that these are the things that we're making adjustments to, right? Talking to be very transparent with Congress about what and why we're trying to do that, to keep the support of the program and why we're going after those requirements. Why does it make sense? And then that, obviously goes up the chain. And then as we get support, comes down the chain, which is beneficial to us. And then ultimately what we have to do is be able to do exactly what we're doing here and getting that out for people to fully understand, and cross communication on programs, organizations, departments. We're trying to put together like an internal learning series of how we've done things so we can take younger program managers, contracting managers, FM, to go when they leave the B-21, how can they go in the other program and say, hey, we did this over here. Does that make sense? Or did you think about it? Or how did we maneuver to be a little bit more flexible? And I think that's the ultimate goal, is to get an understanding of how you can be flexible and take that and push that out so everybody else can try to implement the same type of flexibility as you move forward.
Absolutely. And I think, here at the Nexus conference, we have a multifunctional audience. A lot of the different functionals are represented in industry partners. So on that theme of lessons learned and things that folks can take away from hearing your presentation here at the conference, what do you think is maybe the one thing you'd like them to leave with after they hear what your team was able to accomplish?
Yeah, I'll go first. And I think we hit it before, is using that construct as that instrument and flexibility, and then gathering the right requirements, right? And you may not get it right the first time. Most of the time we don't. But then a constant evaluation of, is that the right path? Is that really what we're looking for? Do we have to continue to make adjustments? And I think that's that term we use in active management. It doesn't mean that we're not doing our job or no one else's. It just means we're actively evaluating where we stand against, where the program sits, what improvements we need to make, and then how do we go and continue to solidify our place and balance across call schedule performance, as well as meeting the operational perspective that we need to from the warfighter capability standpoint.
Yeah, I'd say from my perspective, I think a lot of times in acquisitions, and I'm as guilty as this in prior programs as well, is we focus so rigidly on how do we get the requirement, and if things are starting to deviate from a contractual standpoint, that accountability, stick to get them back into, performing mode, right? And to be able to say, wait a second, we have to balance both that national security and warfighter need as well as that acquisition, realities, and to be able to say those interests can't be divorced from one another, right? And so how do we partner? And through that partnership, right, I think that there's a preserving that relationship and recognizing in that flexibility, it gets us where we all want to go, a lot easier with better collaboration than if we were to kind of do what I would call the old way of acquisitions. And so I think it's really exciting, on the opportunities and even some of the results that we've discovered so far.
Yeah, and I think it's if you look at it, we're not experts at this. Right, we're trying new things. Right, you look at we just had a very quick briefing on the FAR, and so we got to make sure we remain within that. But your DoD 5000, it's like, okay, where can we flex a little bit on that? How can we challenge that and try something new? It's not going to be perfect, but then documenting, understand the return on investment associated with it. What was the benefit? How did it make those changes? And then as we go forward, right, it's like, okay, then we have to communicate. Well, you tried this, what happened? And if we can see the results and document the results, and some of those are failures. We tried this, it did not work. Okay, how could we improve on that process? How do we adjust or make that process better? And we try to walk through is like, at least if you find a failure, we're discovering as early as possible, and therefore we can make the adjustments, get ourselves back on track. And I think that is the biggest thing we want to do. It's not going to be perfect. It's not going to be a perfect requirement, and that's okay. It's not going to be a perfect contract. That's okay. Right? But how can we make the adjustments and get everybody associated with that team? It takes a lot of buy-in. It takes a lot of collaboration, communication to formulate one cohesive strategy, communicate that out to the rest of the team, as well as, the prime, and then all the way up the chain for us, and then keep everybody on that communication plan, that risk reduction effort to make sure that we get the best result.
And I think in order to take it to the next level, whether it's DAU or your program or any program, it's fail fast, right?
100%.
So just try different things.
Absolutely.
And if you're going to fail, just fail fast. I know when we asked to do this podcast, that's pretty much their thought was, fail fast because we hadn't done this before.
100%.
So I'm going to kind of go off script a little bit, and this kind of goes beyond what you're going to tell here. Is we talked kind of off air here about the maintenance aspect of the B-21. It's kind of unique in some ways in that you said you're going to go fully organic. So I came from Tinker Air Force Base, from the Logistics Career Broadening Program, and so I love Tinker. So is there anything you want to tell us about that and how you went about to?
Obviously, I think from previous programs you've seen, we've been behooving to go, contractor support or lead, and really trying to change the dynamic that, with the capabilities that we see at other depots, that they are fully capable with the personnel, with the tools to go do organic maintenance. And It helps in regards to a supply chain aspect. It helps in regards for availability aspect. And so that dynamic that Neal and the team are going to talk about is one of those implementation strategies that is going to be pivotal to make sure that we can create that dynamic so we can do organic maintenance, so we can do field maintenance, making sure that we keep our availability. We have maintainers with the right amount of data at the right times to be able to do their jobs, to keep, generate sorties, to train pilots, and to be ready for the operational mission. And so I'll turn this over to Neal to talk a little bit about the digital twin, but we have to think about that early. And I think we've done a really good job of balancing the changes to the B-21 to make sure we're focusing on that very early, because too far down into the path of, in an EMD or in production phase, is going to be very hard to pull back on that. And so they've done a great job so far. I think the directors and the PO definitely made a consortium all the way up to Air Force OSD, congressional leadership, to continue to pressure us to make sure that we can follow through on that commitment. And Neal will give you just one example of how we're doing that with Digital Twin.
Yeah, so I think one of the top, to demonstrate the priority, it's just the team that the program has put into place, hopefully including myself included in that, right?
Maybe.
I was a specialized contracting officer brought in just to talk about technical data packages and digital transformation. And I think it really goes to the heart of our sustainment strategy. Starts with what kind of data do we have? And what I've seen so far in the program, I've been on the program a little over 2 years, is what our requirements are for all the way down to some of the lowest levels of indenture on our products, really being able to understand the engineering behind it, and then formulating a team who's deep diving in with the data managers, with our prime, as well as into our subs, to really be able to ensure that we have the right data necessary. And then also now from a digital perspective, right? Industry has been producing digital artifacts for years and years, and it is actually a big effort for them to be able to reduce that into the two-dimensional standard drawings that we're used to doing. So being able to move that into kind of what contractors are already doing, and then being able to quickly identify some of the capabilities of showing our maintainers the actual digital native files and models, to be able to implement some of that sustainment, and being able to operate, maintain the parts. There's a lot of really exciting opportunities that we're trying to implement. And it really starts on trying to make sure that we have that core TDP for the entire weapon system, and then trying to then make determinations of what our depots can do from a sustainment standpoint. And so just the team, the resources, the individuals that we put together who know this stuff and know this stuff well, and be able to work with, sometimes partner and educate our industry partners on what we're trying to do. And one of the things that we consistently look at is making sure that we have the right data, even if it means that there's some trade-offs that we're willing to make. So maybe trading off our license rights in order to be able to inherit more data, and to be able to make sure that what we have is a robust set of information so that we can implement those capabilities. That's what we're doing different, and hopefully with great success.
Yeah, and then too, you talk about the team aspect, getting Global Strike in the office with us, right? So we have the users sitting in our offices to be able to define, like, as a maintainer, on previous bomber platforms, what worked, what didn't, what do you think you need? Expand that out to, we have folks at Duiker already embedded into our program very early on, that is going to be absolutely instrumental when we start doing software sustainment. And so making sure that we get the right people in there who can understand and help set us up for success, really. And then it's our job to execute. So those two areas really are influential on how we get ourselves postured. And now it's just our job to find those mechanisms for how we go implement.
Outstanding. So before we let you go and close this out, is there anything you want to kind of leave us with?
Yeah, I think from an acquisition program perspective, I think this is great with what Nexus is doing here. And really it is about cross-functional teams finding the right solutions. And it could be a contracting manager. What we say is no idea is a bad idea, right? And then understanding how that implements across that team, understanding what risks it may take, understanding what the benefit may be, and then really working through that dynamic to define what is the goal you're trying to go after. And if you can start at the top of what that goal is and redefine what you're going after, if it makes sense, then that's where I think the team comes together very nicely to put together a full package and to brief that out and to make decisions rapidly about this is what's going to be the best for our platform, even if there's policy change, contract change, and then working that with the prime contractor to say, yep, we understand this is going to be the change in the manual. This is how we're going to mechanize that. Here's how we're going to pursue, and making sure that all the key players. So that flexibility, I think the Air Force always said flexibility is the key to air power. It truly is in regards to an active contract management and an active IPT construct to make sure you get the right inputs, the right outcomes, and then be as flexible as possible to make it happen.
All right.
And I think from a contract standpoint, as a negotiator, right, the more options you have, the more capabilities you have to collaborate and come up with the right solution. B-21 has a unique number of resources that maybe other programs don't have, but being able to look at the resources that you do have and then try and identify the behaviors or those risk points that need to be driven down. We don't necessarily need to do it from how do I enforce this and how do I work with the contractor to get them to do what we're doing, but take whatever resources, and programs have those, right? And to be able to identify what are those options out there and work with the contractor to say, how do we buy down those risks? I think that's where I think we can take a nugget of what we're doing and scale it, across the Air Force enterprise.
Great, fantastic. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot, both of you guys, for stopping by the DAU booth here at Nexus, and really appreciate it and looking forward to hearing the presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having us. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much. For those watching the podcast, if you like the content, please put it in the description, press like, and tell us, what future content you would like to do. So thank you very much.